We can keep talking about what. Oh God, we're recording.
It's so much easier to talk about negative, like depressing shit, and it's so hard to talk about stories that aren't that, stories in which the drama is a lot more subtle and a lot more less severe, I think.
Yeah, I guess so. Which story do you want to talk about? You want to just start with the long one, or you want to just talk about Kind of Flying real quick?
Kind of Flying, I mean, talk about a story that you could never teach, talk about a type of writing that you could never teach.
Yeah, it's basically a poem, It's
yeah, it really is.
It's its own thing. If poetry is really hard to define because it can be so many different things to so many, depending on what kind of writer you are, what your aesthetic is, but when it works, it fucking works. Anybody could spot it when it's true and it's like moving. This is like 4 pages. I mean, it's hard to call it a poem just because it's written so much like a story. And it would be pretty weird to like see this in a poetry book, I think. But poetry books are pretty weird on the other hand, I think.
I mean, it's only weird now, like the old poem for fucking book length. I mean,
I don't really remember much about Ron Carlson's poetry, but I remember it not being very good when I read it.
And like in respect to his fiction, no, it's just not. And I think it's because when he was writing poetry, he told himself, "I'm writing poetry."
Right.
And when he's writing fiction, he told himself, "I'm writing fiction right now," as opposed to just writing what was burning in his heart. Because I feel like his poetry comes out in his fiction,
Yeah, I was just thinking that, like, going along with what you're saying, one thing I really love about him is he always finds the poetry at the end of the story. Like in The Ordinary Sun, it's like kind of a weird meandery story, but he just finds this weird little poem scene at the end that kind of ties it all together. And I remember that so much with all of his like great stories. He always kind of like ties it together at the end because you're right. There's no like big movements or it's a weird story as opposed to Kind of Flying, which is more about the mundane aspects of life. But it's still just kind of like, where is this thing going? Like what are you trying to get at here? And and he doesn't really like hit you over the head with the meaning or anything, but he just finds some poetry in the scene at the end. But like going back to Kind of Flying, man, like come on, man. What the fuck? This is like everybody should read this. I don't give a fuck who you are. You need to read this fucking story. It's so damn short poem or prose poem, whatever the fuck you want to call it. It's just so beautiful. Every time I read it, man, it fucks me up, dude. Like I literally I decided not to read it right until like right before we were supposed to start. You're late, by the way, motherfucker. All right, anyway, you actually have you're actually doing things with your life, I'm just sitting around reading this story. You're like driving through West Palm Beach traffic, trying not to burn alive in the heat. Anyway, I read this, so I was like, I'm not gonna read this story until like right before we're gonna meet, because I don't want to like burn it out, because I know it's like I told you last time, it's like a sledgehammer whenever I read it, and no different. Like I'm just like reading it without even getting to like the big, crescendo. Like it feels like the whole thing is like a crescendo of like, I don't know, emotion. There's like so much emotion in it. And it's from the very beginning, and it's all throughout. But obviously, it builds up a little bit, and it's got it all, man. It's funny. It's sad. It's kind of sad, yeah. For some reason, it's like it's just absolutely transcendent, though, like and beautiful. Yeah, it's hard to talk. It's really hard to talk about because it's so
Well, let's talk
simple. But
about what happens. You know,
what's that?
let's just talk about what happens.
Okay, you want to go for it?
Yeah. So in A Kind of Flying, there's really only one scene, and
Yeah.
it's the scene where the narrator's wife is late for the wedding. Um, she's driving with her sister, who is very much against the wedding as a principal. She doesn't like the narrator. She doesn't like that he works at a carpet store. She doesn't approve of the marriage. And though I believe the sister's name is Linda, right?
Yeah,
What
Linda and the wife's name's Brady. I don't
Brady?
think I
I'm
don't think the
terrible.
narrator has a name. Oh, we're gonna have fun with that in the next story. Each character
Yeah,
has a very specific name.
yeah.
Um, I don't
Duncan,
think. Yeah,
Reed.
I don't think the narrator has a name in this. I didn't really track it, but not seeing it here. But either way,
So
yeah.
essentially, what
Linda's
happens
like
in this? Go
Linda's
ahead.
like you. Linda's like you're a fucking idiot for marrying this guy. You're gonna spend your life in a carpet store. It's gonna be boring, and you're gonna you're just gonna get bored of him basically. And
And that doesn't happen.
he sets that up. Yeah, he sets that whole thing up, and it leads into the scene you're talking about.
So they pull over. I'm sorry, I got to eat something right now.
It's all good.
They pull over, and the wife, Brady, wants to take a picture of the cake. She's a photographer. She wants to take a picture of the cake outside of the car. And while she's taking a picture, two crows see the cake and pull the ornaments of the bride and the groom off of the cake, thinking that it's edible, and fly off into the distance. All this
Mm,
is rendered through image. This gorgeous
it is.
description of the setting. I mean, just total fire. There's a current of energy that works through from the first line to the last. Everything feels like it's spontaneous. Everything feels like the writer just wrote it in one sitting. Um, it gives you this description of the birds flying away, and that's everything. Like, and they arrive at the wedding. This all happens in summary,
Hmm.
and instead of, because they don't have any ornaments, they put a frogman um on the cake. um,
Which
they
the
don't have it
bride doesn't really find all that funny, and Linda, his sister, definitely doesn't find it funny.
right.
She's all worried about it because she's like believing in omens and shit.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, what am I? Should I really marry this person? you know,
And it all works out. It
God,
all works out.
it's so
The
damn
next scene,
wholesome.
the next scene, if you can call it a scene, takes place 20 years later, and it's the sister-in-law's daughter comes to ask the narrator advice about marriage. And he looks back at that moment and he's like, "That's what my marriage has been like, honestly. I'm just like the groom that the crow pulled away.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
sometimes it's hard, but it's also the best feeling in life." And that's his story. Um,
yeah.
and
It's
the only
weird how he like
it's also interwoven with this with this song that he demanded be played at the wedding, which you should listen to. It's a great song. Um, called El Paso. Another big thing was that Linda didn't want El Paso being played at the wedding. Like, what do we have to? What's like El Paso where we are?
Can you imagine like that kind of pressure at getting married to somebody? Yeah, this like sister, this disapproving sister. He's basically Homer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that me and you are being eloped. Is I think that tension always exists. Nobody wants to give their daughter away, and nobody really. I don't know. I mean, it's never happened in my life. Nobody's ever approved of any marriage in my life.
Oh,
you know.
well, yeah. I cut out there. I actually unplugged my laptop. So I missed what you said after. I don't know if you got this, but I was like, he's basically Homer Simpson because of the
Right.
sister.
Right.
But yeah. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It's a story about a wedding, and a story about how everything in a wedding went wrong. Um, but that the marriage itself was the right decision, and his wife ended up uh, becoming famous as a photographer. Um, he doesn't have to be a carpet store manager anymore. He's going to retire and teach, coach baseball. And everything ended up working out. That's the story. Story sometimes everything does work out. So it's 20 years in 4 pages. By the way, I tried to read this last semester, and it didn't go. It didn't
You mean
go over too well. Yeah, when
you
I was
mean
teaching.
teach it?
Yeah, not just teach it, but like read it to the students.
Oh yeah. I wonder. Yeah, I wonder how that would go, dude. uh, I
It's just there's not enough dramatic tension in the piece. Keep them like on the edge of their seats while they're reading it.
Right, no fights, nobody threatening to jump off the top of a building.
Nobody getting shot
uh,
in the head.
no abortions.
No kid that freezes to death. And
You're also like talking to a bunch of 18, 19-year-old kids who probably aren't really thinking about getting married, the majority of them in that
right.
moment. This is a story for like, mid 20s, 30s, type of like somebody who's a little bit more mature maybe.
Well,
I
me and
taught
you
it
wanted
once.
to be writers when we read this, and so we recognized the beauty of it. But it's written for like people in their 40s and 50s, like
Kind of,
oh,
yeah.
you know, um, like God damn, this is what marriage is like. To think back on their own wedding day and to think back about because it's a story about how you can't see the future, how there are no omens, and how life is lived in one direction, and so much is left up to chance. I think that's what it's about. It's about um, how life feels like everything is left up to chance, and how much luck plays a part in who you are, and how talking about the vulnerability.
Right.
Um, going back to Dennis Johnson. About how scary it is to love somebody. Um, and how most people will just do everything in their power to not be that vulnerable. Um,
Hmm.
I think that's what the story's about.
It's definitely about that. um, when you're
Definitely about the vulnerability of people.
right, what the sister didn't understand, I think, is that Brady loved this guy, and what the sister did understand though. Because like, how could she love a carpenter, or a carpet salesman or whatever? Like, how could she love somebody when that is like the complete opposite of her character? The sister, Brady's character. The sister knew that about her. Like, she is adventurous. She wanted to travel, but I think she was just short sighted. And it's not always as simple as, well, if you marry this person who's like kind of steady and boring maybe from an outside perspective. It doesn't mean like you got to change who you are to be with this person. Like she's still going to be who she was. She became who she wanted to be. Traveled a lot, and it worked out despite the sister's short-sightedness. Teaching this story, dude, it's tough because it's hard. It's like it is so simple and like you said, not a lot of drama in it. And I think the only way to really teach it is to like just gush over how good the writing is. I mean, you can't sit there and say, "Oh, do this or do that," from the story either. So it's kind of like a fucking.
Yeah, I mean, he was right at the height of his power. You also get this feeling when you're in writer's mode. Okay, so much of art is the confidence that you can do the thing and that you're doing it at the height of your ability. So much of it is your ego. Like when you sit down to face the paper. So much of the talent is tied to that. And that's why for so long, I mean, Ron Carlson was just writing fucking story after story after story. 3 books in a row. Plan B for the middle class, The Hotel Eden, and At the Jim Bridger are just off the fucking charts good, as far as short story collections go.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that every story in those books is as like quote unquote fire as this or whatever you want to call it, but those 3 collections are fucking incredible. And I think that where he was at mentally played such a role in this story working, and the next story for that matter.
Right.
And it really just goes to show, like, you can get away with.
Sorry, how do you teach that? You just got to be in the right place in your life to write like this.
You have to write every day. You have to. I mean, you know it as well as anyone. You've had like 6 months where you were just on fire.
Right.
I'm not saying every poem worked, but you just had this explosion of creativity and exuberance.
Yeah, man. Like, so one thing that David Kirby used to say in grad school is it's kind of more important to live the life of a writer than to actually just write, every day. Which goes a little bit against what you're saying, but I think he was half right. I mean, you have to like live a life that is conducive to writing, but you also have to do a lot of work and sit down and write. But maybe I misunderstood what he meant, and I'm not like really representing it fully. But I do think about that a lot in terms of like being a writer, because living a life, I mean, it's such a simple way to say something that's like impossibly complex to like execute. Like what does that mean? And it's like, what does that mean for me exactly to live a life that's conducive to writing? It's tough because the impossible task is kind of going along what you're saying. You gotta have a big ego in a lot of respects to sit down and think you can possibly write something great, because why else would you sit down and write unless you thought that, right? And it's good because you've read it over and over again. I mean, hopefully, if you are at this, or if you're at a certain level, you probably have pretty good tastes, right? And so it's good. For us, it was Sharon Olds, it was this type of shit. In the class, a lot of the modern classics from Hemingway and Philip Roth and shit that we've talked about. So how good it is, and how like kind of like impossible. Maybe when you're younger, you don't have that like, oh, it's kind of impossible, that I feel like it is now to like create something so good that it's like it just comes out perfect. Like you're a little more ignorant then, but that, so how like the height of it. So why the fuck would you sit down without believing you could do it? So it requires an ego, but also I think part of the problem is when you're younger is that you do believe, like every time you sit down and write and you finish something, you're like you do have the ego like, oh, this is the shit. Then you let it sit and it like has a shelf life, you know. It's like a banana for poetry to me. It's like a banana that like turns brown over time, and some, you know, they stay green for a while, and some never go bad. But it's it's a motherfucker, that's for sure. I mean, to think about how to live as a writer, because you're right. Like, I mean, I think you're right. I don't know a lot about Ron Carlson, but he was definitely on fire. I mean, on those three books, and they were all written what in like the '90s and late '80s, early '90s, mid '90s, something like that.
We can look it up right now.
I know they're sequential in the very least. So like he was definitely on fire in those three collections. So it, like, makes you wonder why a little bit. But I think what you're saying is true. Like it was just dedicated, you know. Like think about shit. Like I kind of look at Nick in a way. Like when we first met him, he was kind of going into it. You know, going into a few year stretch, like 5-10 years or whatever, of just writing fucking fire, right?
Yep.
I think it had a lot to do with getting, you know, being married. Of course, the group meeting us a little bit and like starting to have like become a father and everything. Like so much was going on in the life. And of course, Nick is kind of a psycho where he has so much discipline, you know, like to get up early enough, even with this whole busy life, you know, fucking running a college basically as well in Palm Beach State.
Being president of his union.
Right.
Teaching fucking 7 classes or 5 classes, and 2 kids, and working out all the time, and now he's dating women and this and that, you know, and taking care of the house. I mean, you just have to kind of be a maniac.
Right. Yeah, but he has his own way, you know, and if we tried to like follow it point by point, obviously it would fall apart pretty quickly. But even if we were just like, oh, we're gonna get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning to, you know, start writing our story again, like, dude, I don't think so, man.
Yeah, everybody had to have their own way.
Yeah,
I don't know. I just think
my way was coffee and mania, you know, and getting drunk a lot, and that only lasts so long though. I think.
Well, I think the height of our creativity was being around each other in the group and being at FAU and just like decimating these workshops. And I don't know, for me, it was dating all these crazy women and, you know, working at a strip club and, you know, just the drama of your life and my family life and my love life.
Yeah, definitely a lot of drama fed into
My
it.
work, you know,
Right.
just something was always happening back then. There was never like a day where we just sat around playing video games or sat around like cleaning the fucking house.
Right.
I don't know if like the thought would have probably been abhorrent to us, or you know, all we did was walk the dog and and read a book, like which was basically my life during this little break that I've had. Read a book a day. We were just doing so much, and so much came. Like we were. It was also just like the fun of learning something new every day,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
seeing how far you could push things before things started to push back, before things started to fall apart. It was magical. Something magical about being in your 20s. By the way, um, the News of the World, which was his first collection, was 1987, and it's good. It's worth reading. I think Plan B for the middle class was a large improvement. I think that, which was 1992.
Okay.
The Hotel Eden was 1997. I think that's his magnus opus as far as short story collections go. And At the Jim Bridger was 2002. So he's written novels between that and since then. but I don't think his novels come close to the levels that his short stories reach.
Yeah, it's interesting because like for me, his the magic in it is always kind of like the ending of his stories, and like I don't know if he, like I do like I this story, The Ordinary Son, like talking about Ordinary Son, like a longer story. It's like it is a breeze to read, to be fair, but like the big payoff for me is at the end, and it always was that way with him for me. I don't know, is that how it is for you? So I'm like wondering how the novels go. Like how you, if I assume you've read some of it, then like is that where it falls apart? Does it kind of like just drag after a while, or not a lot of payoff?
It drags from the very beginning.
Okay. So he
Um,
knows he's like in it for the long haul when he's writing a novel. And you kind of feel
yeah,
that maybe.
I think that there are really very few novelists who were also really great short story writers. Um, they could do both equally good. I think Hemingway was a rarity. Um,
Philip Roth. Well,
Philip Roth,
did he
but
write? He didn't
he
really
only
write it.
wrote after
Hmm.
Goodbye Columbus. He never wrote anymore that I've seen. Um,
Yeah, I was just thinking that. It's like, yeah, after that, like, I don't know if he kind of like followed the money, man. It's like I just spit out these novels.
I'm not saying that they don't exist, these people, but they're a rarity. Alice Munro can't write a novel to save her life. Hopefully, she never hears this, but it's true. Yuval Lahari can't write a novel. Um, just so like Stephen King, I don't think can really write a short story worth of fuck. Quite honestly,
Well, it's weird how these like like the long form and the short story kind of don't really jive very well most of the time.
two totally different art forms. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, there's Nick could do both, although he hasn't published a novel. But I do think that he can do both. But he's the rare type of human being that obsesses over what a story is. Um, I'm surprised he can't write poetry as much as he obsesses over
I
writing.
would love to see that. It
I
would
don't
be
think I've
so
ever met
bad.
anybody who obsesses over writing as much as Nick.
He's so good at
Um,
talking about poetry, though. You know, that's the
yeah,
thing.
no, he's great.
Uh, because he comes at it from a different like a lot of poets are pretty you know, they're just bad at articulating the nuts and bolts of writing. You know, they're really woo woo when it comes to writing. A lot of them, most of them.
Yes.
Not all of them, of course. There are some. I remember Tony Hoagland was kind of like Nick. It was like all about the nuts and bolts. Sometimes you go too far. Though, with Thomas Lux, remember him talking about like syllable counts? I got
Oh
obsessed
yeah.
with like syllables and spondies and fucking iams and all this shit. And it doesn't really help you write a poem. And go look at a lot of. Well, I'm not here to talk shit, but Nick was great about talking about your poetry. You know, and I guess a lot of it did have to do with like how low level we were when we were in the workshops. It was probably pretty easy to like kind of point out the flaws in it, but it's not always easy to say it in a way that doesn't completely discourage the person. So you're right, man. He just loves writing. I mean, he knows how to talk about writing. Let's goes without saying.
Yeah. He knew how to talk to us, and I think that the reason he knew how to talk to us is because he wasn't worried about discouraging us. You know, I don't know how to describe what I felt at that time, except to say that nothing that anybody said could ever discourage me. Um, I
Same.
mean, at least to the point of quitting. I'd be discouraged in the sense that I'd be down. I could certainly get depressed, but I could never get discouraged. You know, and I
Yeah,
think
there was.
I,
Go
I
for it,
think I've
man.
always been
Sorry.
that way. I've never wanted to be anything other than an artist or somebody who created things, whatever word you want to give to those people. You know, and I was 10 years old. All I fucking did was draw naked women. That was it. Uh, I got through all of middle school and all of high school. I didn't learn one fucking thing. I took as many art classes as I could. And when I got to college, it was just more of the same. And
hell yeah,
it really crystallized when I found writing, because I was like, here's finally an art form where the people, at least at the immediate presence, aren't pussies. They aren't scared to tear each other down. They aren't scared to give praise when it's earned, and they aren't scared to debate every step of the process as to how they reached the conclusions of those two things. And it was also more intimate. Like, it wasn't just here's an image that I created. It's here's how I fucking see the world. Here's how, the logic of my brain perceives the reality around me. And here's the people in my life that I care about and the things that they have to go through. And when I finally learned that I could write about my family, things, and I could write about my girlfriends and whatever, things went to a different level. But getting there took so much. And LaRocca really just looked at it like, I'm going to tell you everything that you're doing right and everything that you're doing wrong. And in the beginning, you're going to be doing a lot more wrong than you're doing right until something breaks and you finally start doing more right than you're doing wrong. Of course, now the game changed again after grad school, and it was like, we only want to talk about things that are of a certain caliber, and the only distinction between the things of a certain caliber and everything else is this stuff you need to publish. You just need to get it the fuck out there.
right.
Just get it out there and bear the slings and arrows of people reading it or not reading it.
Yeah, and it turns out that's way fucking harder and more discouraging than anything that Nick could have ever said.
And it'll be even more discouraging should we ever get famous. But because
I don't think we have to worry about that, Greg. Not
the
with
only
this
thing
podcast.
getting with this podcast out, like, holy shit, I might get fucking 5 readers now. But
I don't know. I don't know if we have 5. I think half of them are Laura, and the other 2 are you and I, and then maybe somebody clicked the wrong button on YouTube.
Morales and Amanda probably listened to 10 fucking minutes of it and was like, fuck this.
I would respect them less if they listened to the whole thing. Let's be honest.
We do it for us, not for you, man.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so much of why this stuff works is because of that exuberance. I don't think that Ron Carlson, by the way, I don't think, like, there's a lot that Ron Carlson doesn't do in any of those short stories that Hemingway does. And he relies a lot on humor. He relies a lot on wit. You never read one of his stories and have, your blood pumping. I think maybe there's 2 stories that he's written. One of them's Keith, and the other one's The Hotel Eden itself. That you read it and you get to the end and it breaks your heart. You feel like crying. I think a lot of what carried him through to the height, by the way, of American short story contemporary fiction was just his humor and his wit and the ability to deliver scene and the knowledge that he had to write about people that he knew. For example, there's like nobody in any of these short stories, you'll notice, with the exception of the 2 I mentioned, like, fuck somebody that they're not supposed to fuck. And now they have to deal. They have to deal with that. They never have a brother OD. There's nothing about drugs in any of these short stories.
You sound sad about it, Craig. You
psychopath.
I get what you're saying. I'm just busting your balls.
I didn't even suffer from like alcoholism. You know, he wasn't even a drinker. I mean, Ron Carlson was just a fucking. He was a nerd. He walked around with a briefcase and in a suit. He was one of those guys. And you know what's funny is in real life he had to retire in disgrace because when he was in his 20s, he fucked or supposedly fucked a 16-year-old student of his. I don't even know if he fucked her. I just think he kissed her or something. But the story came out during the Me Too fiasco, and he had to retire from California. I think it was Irving he was teaching at.
Yeah, University of California.
Yeah. So whether or not that happened or not, I mean, like you would think that after basically being banished from academia and disgrace, you'd have nothing but stories to write. But either those stories aren't being written or they're not being published. The
Definitely
latter,
not
by
going to
the
get
way,
published.
yeah, the latter is probably the case, um, but it's a shame because those stories need to be written. Um, the same thing, by the way, happened to Garrison Keeler, who wrote nothing but about sex and about love. And I don't know. I think that was one of my problems with Ron Carlson as I get older is so little of his writing was about loving the wrong person, um, being heartbroken by the wrong person, you know, dealing with the aftermath of that.
Or doing the wrong thing, which is probably which he obviously has experience with.
Doing the wrong thing because everybody does, John, whether they retire in disgrace or not, everybody has done the wrong thing, and that's what's worth writing about. You know, you always have to make mistakes, and maybe that's the easiest way to put it. uh, is that the characters in these stories don't make a whole lot of mistakes. Now, Keith is an exception, and the Hotel Eden is an exception. There are other exceptions out there, but I'm just saying, as a whole, that's my problem with his writing. Is so much of it is about things seeming like they're going to go bad and then not going bad, you know, and ending up all right.
Right.
But
Do you
maybe
think
that's
that like implies a kind of insincerity, like on the whole with him?
maybe.
Like, is that why though? Like, you look for that sort of thing because you like it's hard to ignore that this type of shit happens in the world, and there's so much darkness, and that's well, kind of the reason why I wanted to go to Carlson is because I knew he was more of a light-hearted writer. But you do make a good point. It feels a little disingenuous, maybe. I mean, this story is great. I don't know, like. There's nothing disingenuous like on the page with A Kind of Flying to me.
No.
I mean, if he started talking about like, the war in Afghanistan or something, I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
This was beautiful and you ruined it.
Yeah, he's not that type of writer. Maybe this is the best way I could put it. Ron Carlson was a great writer who could write about happiness, and he could write about troubled people, but I don't think he could ever write about pain, human fucking pain, and human misery. And I think so much of what allowed him the access to his art um, was the exuberance of life and the exuberance of everything going well.
Right. You have to commend him though for being able to write about happiness because it's a motherfucker to write about. It's hard to write happy, It's I mean, maybe it's not for everyone. It is for me. I'll speak for myself. It's really fucking hard to write happy sometimes, because it does like I guess for me, it would just be if I was writing about a certain topic, like my brother or my family. It'd be hard to just be like, "Oh, it's so happy," this one moment was so happy. It's like, no, you got to juxtapose it to the reality of the relationship, and
We're also just not those type of guys. We're just not that.
guess.
We're not those type of guys, and we could never be that type of artist because it's not how we see the world. Um,
Yeah, how
I don't
unfortunate,
know.
or how fortunate for us.
Ron Carlson is cynical, but I. This is really this more than anything was my problem with grad school. I can't fucking stand being around happy people.
God damn it.
Like
Me either, man.
I never went to my prom. I
Me
don't
either.
think I could ever go to a prom. Uh, I try to avoid parties whenever I can, unless they're the kind of parties me and you used to throw. But
Right.
I even try to avoid those now too because
They're
I have a
dangerous.
family.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Too much to lose.
and yeah, too much to lose these days. I don't know. And it's hard. I don't want to say it's hard for me to read this stuff because it's not. I've always loved these two stories. I've taught both Ron Carl. I've taught both of these stories actually to my classes. Tried to break them down, get my students to understand that what they were going through was significant. It is significance, even if it's not the end of the world type of drama or whatever. Even if it's just you and your friends hanging out at a store, busting each other's balls. We can shift to the ordinary sun, which
Sure.
I think as far as like line by line wise, is my favorite story um of Ron Carlson's. By the way, something we
Really?
haven't touched on is Ron Carlson, or whatever faults he has, he may be the best line by line short fiction writer of in American history. you
What makes
know,
you
I,
say that? Like, do you have an example? I'm curious what you mean by that.
we can
I
go
think I agree.
you can point to any paragraph in either of these stories and read them out loud, and they sound like fucking magic. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
there's so much. Well, let's look at the first. God damn it! I had it on my tablet. Um, Read the first paragraph of The Ordinary Sun.
Story of my famous family is a story of genius and its consequences, I suppose. And I am uniquely and particularly suited to tell this story since genius avoided me, and I it. And I remain an ordinary man. There is such a thing. Calm in all weathers, aware of event. I get what you're saying. But uninterested and generally incapable of deciphering implication. I mean, damn, dude, there's so much there. Like,
That's
just
not even the whole
syntactically.
paragraph, but yeah,
Oh, well, yeah, it's just the first sentence. But
that's
yeah,
the first
just
fucking sentence.
syntactically, it's just so much packed with so much energy and intelligence. It's amazing.
There's poetry even in lines that are totally abstract. He could hear the poetry um in philosophy.
As my
You
genius
know,
brother Garrett used to say, Reed, you're not screwed too tight like the rest of us, but you're still screwed. This
what I
is a
mean by
10-year-old boy saying that. So he's characterizing his brother, how smart he is, and mature he is at the same time while being
at the
like,
same time he's busting my fucking balls.
yeah, he's busting your balls. What a great line
And,
of dialogue.
yeah. That's just it goes on. It's two more sentences, I think, or is it one more?
Now
We talk about
now
it.
there's a definition of the common man you can trust, and further, you can
Further, you
trust
can trust
me.
me.
There's no irony in that, or deep inner meaning, or Freudian slips. Any kind of slips, really. Simply what it says. My mother told me many times I have a good heart, and of course, she was a genius. And that heart should help with this story. But a heart, as she said so often, good as it may be, is always troubled.
Yeah, always troubled. Fucking.
Did you memorize this at one point in time?
I've just read this story so much. I mean, Jesus Christ.
You transcribed this one, didn't you, back in the day?
Yeah,
I remember.
I transcribed this.
Psycho.
It's another story you can't find on the internet. You have to go fucking buy the book, which was at the Jim Bridger. I mean, Jesus Christ. Talk about unteachable. You can't teach anybody to write line by line like that. It is something just inherent in you. It is somebody who reads every day and who is writing about things that are happening in his head, about a narrator that he knows a lot, and writing and having so much fun, which is another thing you can't teach. You can't teach people to have as much fun writing as Ron Carlson has.
Yes, he's definitely having just fun flexing, really. I think that's basically what you're saying. He's flexing his writing muscle in that first pair, the whole story. But yeah, like line by line, he's just fucking working out. He's flexing. He's benching while he's writing this fucking thing, dude. And it's like, it's not even discouraging. Sometimes when you like read or like see a great piece of art, you're like, fuck, dude, what am I doing with my life? You know, we all had that moment, but it's just so fun. It's like, God damn, I want to go right now, you know?
Yeah. It is a lot of fun to read. You can hear the fun that he had writing. And you can take that lesson from it. Like, if I were teaching this to a group of writers, I'd be like, guys, I don't know if any of us are ever going to write like this, line by line. I don't know if you have to. There are stories that are better than this, where the writers couldn't write a sentence half as good as Ron Carlson. But the thing to take away is that you should be having a lot of fun.
Right. He's having fun. You cut out a little bit there, but he's having a lot of fun. But he's also not like.
If there's no Sharon Olds in you, if there's no Dostoevsky in you, there's no Hemingway in you, that's okay. You don't have to be that type of writer. You know, anybody would pick this up and have a fucking blast. Read. You know,
right. The only thing I would say is that, like, even though he is having fun, a lot of writers kind of get up their own ass about, like, we've talked about this, about getting up their own, like, writing as like a masturbatory act, you know, like you're just kind of fucking around with language, and you know, you're being really witty, like, but nobody really gets the joke unless they're like studying you line by line type of fucking writing. So if he ever forgets that there's a reader there and that they care about people and they want to hear about people and they want to, you know, read a scene and things are happening in the story, there's a lot of heart. He doesn't forget that in it too. It's like love, you know, in the story as well.
It's about families. By the way, one of Ron Carlson's early quotes that meant so much to me when I was in my early 20s was that if you were writing about a guy and a girl on the side of the road changing a tire, you had to be able to describe the guy, the girl, the car, the road, and the tire, and the street, and be able to deliver those things to the reader, including how like hard the job is changing a tire and what type of conversation they're having. But that was never the point of the story. The point was, who are these two people and what's going on between them, and how do I deliver their heart to the reader and break the reader's heart with it.
I remember that from back in the day. I'm just thinking, oh shit, I got a long way to
go. Well, Ron, and another quote, to throw another one at you, was that he didn't care. Oh shit, my phone's about to die. He didn't care. Oh, so I'm gonna plug it in so I can finish this. he didn't care about anything, no matter how well written it was, unless it was personal, whether it was fiction or nonfiction, poetry, novels, whatever. It had to be personal. You had to be risking something of your own life in order for it to matter to him. And maybe that, more than anything else, is another thing to take away from this, from both of these short stories.
Write songs about your girlfriend, man.
Yeah. I mean, Alice Cooper said it best, dude. You can do everything else right, but if you're not delivering something personal, then the reader's never going to respond.
Right. It gets boring. It just gets boring. It's so abstracted. Like, you want to hear about people, that's what's interesting. If you're talking to a friend, what are you going to talk about? Like, if you're one-on-one with a friend over coffee, what are you talking about? The shit that's going on in your life, and the trick is, for us, how do we turn that into art, yeah. I guess you read a lot of Ron Carlson.
You ever have a friend who's like really fucking boring? You can't stand them.
Yeah. You know what they talk about? I'm not gonna cut you off, but you know what they talk about? They talk about fucking TV, dude.
Yeah.
And only TV. It's okay to talk about TV and what you watch, especially if it's like fucking Breaking Bad or, that level, and it's like gonna change your life type of fucking TV. But if it's every fucking thing, it's like TV. Anyway.
Right, because there's nothing personal that they're willing to sacrifice for the relationship.
Yeah. Just small talk. Just important in its own way, but can't sustain you as a writer, or in a friendship.
I think that's why people don't like critics as much as they like artists, or politicians for that matter, as much as they like artists, is because the critics and the politicians can't do that. They're not willing to do that. No. They're not willing to do that and fail.
Right.
And they're also not willing to do that and succeed, or else they'd be artists.
Well, they just chose their game, man. Like, if you are too personal and you fuck up and say the wrong thing as a politician, you're done. If you do that as a critic, you lose credibility. You could lose credibility, if you're not good at it. It become its own art form to be personal. I guess you do. I mean, what are you saying? What do you mean by, like, as an artist, what are you risking by being personal, by talking about your life?
Everything. Risk everything. That's what we mean when we say risk everything. That's what everything is I'm going to all right, so for example, one of my favorite artists, actually we could talk about all of my favorite artists in this capacity. All of my favorite artists have had their families destroyed after their success as artists. Eminem's marriage totally collapsed. His mom tried to sue him for $10 million.
Damn, boy.
His grandmother would go on all over the internet, give interviews about how disgusting his music was. His grandmother filed a motion against him so that he couldn't release this footage that he had of him and his uncle Ronnie rapping. His uncle Ron was the one who taught him how to rap, or first got him into rapping.
Okay, yeah.
Marilyn Manson, Brian Warner, had his first marriage. His first fiance was what was her name? The first one who started the Me Too stuff. God, I can't remember her fucking name. But it was a really public breakup. His first wife, Dita Von Teese, left him. Evan Rachel Wood, that whole thing happened in the public view. She was a celebrity. He was a celebrity. I mean, just relationship after relationship after relationship just erupting in front of the public view. Tupac Shakur had to go to prison for sexual harassment, or not sexual harassment, sexual assault. Just their lives. Kurt Cobain, that whole thing. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
You know, I'm surprised he lasted as long as he did. Just everything about their lives were just totally destroyed by exposing it to the public. That's why I told you earlier. There's, the only thing worse than having nobody read all of our stuff is having everyone read it.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I've written some.
I mean,
There's some
I know I'm
poems that
talking
I
out of my
can't.
ass, but
Nah, there's some poems I've written. You know better than anybody that are a little. I should probably not. I don't know. I don't know what to do with them. Some of them are really fucking good.
yeah, the
You know,
best ones are the ones.
I told. Bro, I told somebody. I'm not mentioning names here. I told somebody I wrote a poem about having sex with my wife while thinking about my brother and talking to him, and they're like, "Dude, that's for the diary, bro." I'm like, I was like, "Fuck you!" It's like, no, and I was a little drunk, so I was like, "Nothing's off limits, bro." It's like, no, you gotta let it all hang out. No, I defended it, of course, but it's like, yeah, I mean, that's how some people, want to hear about it. In the abstract, like if I, a lot of the times think about like speaking of Eminem, think about Kim.
Yeah.
Does anybody really want to hear a song if they're like, hey dude, I wrote a song about murdering my wife, my fiance,
yeah.
or ex-wife or whatever, and in violent detail, do you want to hear it? Everyone's gonna be like, nah dude, I'm good, I'm gonna go make some macaroni and cheese right now. What the fuck are you talking about, you psychopath? But when you hear it, or Stan, like, you wanna, well, I don't know, that one's kind of intriguing maybe because it's so kind of weird.
I have this story about some fan of mine who kills himself and his wife just to get my attention. Really, if you think about it, it's the biggest ego trip in the world.
I was just gonna say, dude, it does just kind of sound like, you just stop sipping your own farts, Eminem. Only he could get away with it.
It's not that. That's why you can't reduce things to a line. But
yeah,
it's
so much
not
more
that.
empathy and complexity.
I think Eminem knew what it was like to be that guy. Eminem wrote. By the way, Eminem wrote Tupac, and I don't know if Tupac ever got his letters, but I know his mom got Eminem's letters. Maybe he only wrote to her after he died, but he was that guy also. And you can listen to it even now when he talks about his heroes. He was just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he reads like 10 minutes of acknowledgments to other rappers, just listing their names for fucking 10 minutes in alphabetical order. Here's every rapper that meant something to me. He's got like 5 pages of it. At the end, he just starts rapping their names. It's kind of cool, but
that's not cool.
Yeah, I mean, don't give a synopsis of your own poems. Just read them to people.
Right. That's a good rule of thumb. It's okay to talk about other people's work, as a critic, I guess, or just. But as soon as you start talking about your own shit, it's just not gonna fly, dude. You're gonna sound either egotistical or it's just gonna sound gross, or I don't know. Hard to. It's a good point though. Hey Craig.
Yo.
What about this story, The Ordinary Son? Like, you said earlier that it was your favorite Ron Carlson story. So, like, tell me why. Yeah. Like, he's written a lot of good short stories. So why this one?
Well, this one was definitely my favorite for the longest time. I'll talk about that. I'll talk about why it changed too. Why this one? I think that when I was in my 20s, what impressed me most about short story writers was their ability to deliver, like to tell the story. It wasn't the story itself. It was just like how cool and how unique and how intimate and how exuberant and how different can you tell me a story other than all the other ones I've heard.
You
By the
know,
way,
that's a great point, and it makes me look back on how you used to be when I first met you, how like kind of awkward and quiet you were in the first like couple years, unless we were like drinking or whatever. But
yeah,
yeah, and I saw that. I saw how much you admired storytellers like this. That makes a lot of sense. And now
yeah.
you are that. You're that person that, exuberant, can tell a story, can tell a joke, all this stuff. That's great.
And I think maybe that's the point too. Is now that I can do those things, maybe not. I definitely can't write sentences like this, but now that my personality has become such that I'm not so withdrawn, you start thinking of stories in a new perspective. And what I like now are characters that make mistakes early in the story. Early in the story, what grabs your attention is how real the mistake feels that happens to them. Maybe we'll talk about that with the next short story that we talk about. But I mean, for Christ's sakes, Thomas Wolfe. I mean, talk about a mistake that just keeps going on and on. He just butchers the whole town. A Child by Tiger.
Yeah.
Um, and the
Yeah.
mistake was ever buying that gun in the first place.
Well, this mistake was twofold. It was the mistake of the town for having a culture that
Yeah,
completely like disregarded this person and kind of created this mentally unwell person, right? Some
yeah,
this town out of slavery after slavery, so racist, and the shopkeeper making a mistake of selling him the gun. What was I supposed to do? Tell him his money's
yeah,
no good? The guy for buying the gun, the guy for doing it, of course, the kids for not telling anybody
yeah.
that he had the gun. On a minute level, just the cops, how they handled the situation, like it was
Yeah.
a sport to go get this guy. All these
Because it
things, it
was.
was like mistakes,
It was.
mistakes, 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 mistakes.
And the whole thing's a mistake.
This story is
Dostoevsky's A Beggar Boy, A Christmas Tree. The mistake was the kid ever being born. Um,
right. Being born at the wrong
you know,
time, in the wrong place, the wrong parents.
one that just went up earlier today, The Undefeated. The mistake was not retiring from um, being a matador. Is that what they're called? From being a
Yeah,
bullfighter.
yeah,
While you still had your life and your liberty. Um, the mistake in this story, it seems to me, is that, see, that's the thing. It's hard to pin down like what the mistake is. I don't know if any of the characters really make a mistake per se. Um,
yeah. It's a good question. The mistake is he's not a genius, and it drives the whole story.
yeah,
It's like a mistake
nature
of
made a
God or
mistake
something.
with him by not making him a genius like everybody else in his family. But he doesn't. It doesn't like daunt him. If anything,
No,
he loves not being a genius because he's learning how to be a human being, and be a kid, which nobody else in his family ever got to do.
right. The
But I don't
story,
know if I'd go so far as to call that a mistake per se. It's really a story that is about embracing your youth and embracing life on its own terms and finding your place in the world. But as soon as he discovers that his brother is a genius, his little brother is a genius, um, the next like 8 pages are just him, like the awkwardness of him finding his place in the world. Really,
right?
like as far as I
This,
can tell, the only mistake that he makes in the whole story is when he's falling asleep on his broom, and his boss is like, "Hey, you want to pull that fucking zombie act? You can go home." you
and
know,
the end, buddy. The
right?
sardine or the shrimp in the trunk. The big mistake. Like it's like these little things, these stupid little mistakes that like an ordinary son or an ordinary person would make, right? Like,
Yep.
it's not like these big life. Yeah, it's like, a lot of this story is about that relationship because his little brother was the last one that he had in his family, and then when he finds out he's a genius, he kind of is alone in that, and that's kind of what drives the story, like you said. He like kind of delves into his own life, getting this shit job, buying a car, which none of his other family members have, becoming a regular person, basically. And maybe that's why the ending of the story is so like kind of moving for me. Is that despite that loneliness, he still has this like kind of funny and sweet moment with his brother. Showing him this dumb car, this big dumb car, and his brother's like, "Yeah, that's my brother, man." He still has that like little brother in him, even though he's just like 200 IQ little kid. And it's just so damn sweet.
Yeah, it is. It is a really great. It's a really good feel good story. His brother finally admires him, and
Yeah,
what Reed learns is that even though he's not a genius, his family he can still have a connection with his family, and he is still somebody worth being admired.
yeah,
But and maybe that's the point of the story is I'm still worth being admired. You know, um, because you can tell from the beginning he has so much admiration for everybody around him. But the drama is all left off the page for the most part. His sister has this um, meltdown that all happens off the stage. He only
yeah.
briefly
We
mentions it.
don't really know what's
His
going on there.
father is this recluse who has this weird relationship with his wife, who's the exact opposite of a recluse, who's always out there reading her poetry and fighting for the working man.
Right.
And it almost feels like they don't have a relationship. And maybe that's the point of the story, is that I mean he says in the beginning we don't even most people in my family don't even realize that they're related. Because we don't even have like the same name, the same last names, we don't have
Right.
nothing.
Yeah, it's about like changing, like all his family members are changing the world, you know, but they're not making any connections. And only this
Right.
guy can make a connection with anybody in the family, and he does so with the little brother.
And it's also about the loneliness of genius, maybe, and what a price that is to pay. Now, it's definitely the whole point of House is when your brain is operating at these levels, you can't build human relationships.
Right. Also, when you're
Um,
a complete fucking selfish asshole, like
Asshole,
that.
yeah.
But
But his thesis was that he had to be that in order to be as cold and calculating as he had to be in order to do his job. Um,
yeah,
and I mean, you talk about how quiet and awkward I was. I mean, uh, it's another thing that pulled me towards writing was that I was tired of not making human connections with the people around me. And I was tired of like making art for myself. There's nothing more masturbatory in the world than that. Uh,
true
you know,
that.
I knew it wasn't genius. It was just desperation that drove me towards writing.
I
Um,
mean, here, brother. Let's be real. I was a week out from my brother dying. That's when I met you guys.
yeah,
That's
it
it. I was
wasn't
as
genius. It
desperate
was
as it comes.
desperation. Anyways, it's a great story. You read it and you're blown away by how fun it is to read and how genius the sentences come out. It's another one of the ironies is this is all written at this very high level, and in some ways, maybe Reed was a genius. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I felt that a lot reading it. Like it's written in such a smart way, and even when he's like just in normal situations, he's thinking in smart ways, and he doesn't get caught up in like that porn mag scene. He doesn't get caught up in like the vulgarity of it. He like gets really weird with it and thinks about
Starts
it like
imagining the thing is a separate planet. A
right.
scene too perfect
That
for anything but ceremony. Another one, a beautiful
yeah,
fucking line.
beautiful. And that also like kind of creates a little bit of a tension in the story because at that point he declares himself not a genius, but as a reader you're like, well, maybe he might, maybe he's just a late bloomer, you know, because he's the way he talks about the world sometimes is very smart. You know, he
Yeah,
might not be a
maybe his
genius, but he's brilliant.
yeah, and so you're not like captivated by the mistakes that the story makes. You're more intrigued by the narrator, and you make this connection with the narrator because he's so human and he's so vulnerable and he's so
Right.
funny. By the way, one of the lines from the short story is something that I would often quote to my students. Seeing isn't knowing. To see something is only to establish the first terms of your misunderstanding.
Great
Which,
dialogue, right, from the dad.
yep, it's just fucking. And it makes you realize, how little any of us ever really know anything in life. Um, and how willing are you to sit down and try to understand something on any level? Um,
Yeah, man. Wonderful, wonderful. Like that's what I love about short stories. Little lines like that, even if they're just in dialogue, can come out and just slap you in the face and stay in your head forever. You know,
yeah.
it's but you have to be writing like this, right? This high level where shit comes out like that. And I guess have a lot of talent
You
and
have to you
whatnot.
have to know your narrator, and your narrator has to be willing to. By the way, so little of this. The only scene, there's two scenes that happen, as far as I can tell, maybe three. You got the scene where the narrator Reed and his best friend Jeff are breaking into this guy's apartment, not to steal anything, but just to look at a giant picture of a vagina in a
Yes.
porno mag. And the guy comes home, so they have to hide. Fucking beautiful. You got a little scene of them fishing later
Yeah, yeah.
uh, in the creek, which is gorgeous. Um, and then you have the scene with the brother at the end.
All right. And there's
So
like
they only
in the
got
house
kind
a
of
little bit. Like it's more of a it's in summary, I guess. Like they're just kind of like doing a portrait of the family in the beginning. You know,
yes,
moving from the father to the mother and their household situation to the sister. And there's like these little dips into scene, like in the sum in the I guess it's in summary there. So it is like structurally it's a weird another kind of weird story. It's very organic, I'd say, on how it unfolds and it feels different than what we've read before and talked about on here before.
yeah, we
Uh,
almost always read scene focused stories. So here's a story where that's very exposition and summary focused.
yeah, the
Um,
character, like the characters of the family, it's like
yep,
uses those as anchors rather than the scene itself. But it does, like you say, in a couple instances, get like pretty well entrenched in a scene and setting, and
absolutely.
things
Because it
happen.
has to. You have
Right.
to. And Ron Carlson knew that. Ron Carlson was somebody who could write beautiful scenes. Um, but really his gift was just getting into the voice of different characters. I mean, talk about another amazing skill that we may have glossed over. By the way, both of these narrators sound completely different.
Yes.
They sound fucking. And it was the first thing I mentioned after Nick gave me. By the way, there's another author Nick gave me. I was like, man, I don't think I've ever read anybody more diverse than Ron Carlson. Somebody able to break into the heads and deliver the
Right.
writing of different characters to this extent.
Yeah, man, two totally different white dudes.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, it is, and the irony is that they're both like the one in a kind of flying is like an actual ordinary dude, you know,
Yeah.
like it could be like a similar person just in different stages of their life, but yeah, they feel completely original. I think is what you're saying, right? Like,
Yeah. They both feel totally. I mean, if you told me this is two different authors, I'd believe it. Um,
for sure, man. Not just like character, but like the way it's written is so. We talk about the kind of flying like a poem. It is just its movement is completely different, and organic, I guess, is a way to put it for this story. Kind of flying feels like it's structured. It has that big break in the middle, or like a little bit further than the middle, like 3 pages in. And so it feels like more on rails, even though it still surprises you with how like moving it is. This one just feels completely like it's gonna go anywhere, and you don't really know where it's gonna go. So yeah, diverse is a good way to put it for Ron Carlson's story writing.
every short story he wrote was like this. Was just
Yeah,
that unique. Keith is told objective third person, so it's this really really quiet, matter of fact voice that tells you as little as it possibly has to. It just lets the characters. It almost feels like a play. Lets the characters deliver themselves and tell their own story through dialogue and through scene.
right.
Um, the Hotel Eden is this guy just talking about meeting some guy at a bar who ended up becoming his mentor, and he ended up liking a lot. And this guy stole his girlfriend. That's why I said it's as close. Keith and Hotel Eden are as close as Ron Carlson ever gets to real human pain. Um, but
Right.
every great story was um, just that unique in how it was delivered. And so he was somebody who wasn't afraid of reinventing himself story by story. He never let himself have a niche. He never let himself be like, all right, this is what a Ron Carlson story looks like. It's going to look like this thing.
Right.
The
And you
plot was
can't,
always different. Right. You can't.
you just
You
can't.
can't.
You just can't do that, man. As soon as you do that, you're fucked. You're
Yeah.
totally fucked. And that's why writing,
So,
and we said it before, and that's why writing is so goddamn hard a lot of times. I mean, look, you could do it. It's hard to pull out the same magic trick twice. You know what I mean? It's really fucking
yeah.
hard. Well, I mean,
Let
maybe that's a
alone
bad
500
metaphor,
times.
but but yeah, like let alone a bunch of fucking times like some of our favorite writers have done over and over again. Because I guess even in a story, it's like it's really hard because once you get into it, it becomes it becomes a thing, like its own thing. When it's good, it will become its own thing. You can't rely on a template. Obviously, you can't rely on. Uh, it's like you have a feeling, right, of how to write something good. That's all you really have. Like, hopefully, if you've done it once, you have this feeling, and you try to replicate that feeling. But how to get there, man, is a motherfucker. And we've tried to figure it out. We've taken countless classes. This whole degree is devoted to this shit. And at the end of the day, it's just about sitting down and, you know, relying on your talent, your dedication. Obviously sitting down is part of the dedication and of writing, and of course you do learn. Like, I'm not saying that you can't learn how to write better, but it's like it's this weird ethereal thing that like you do get better the more you do it, right? It's hard to quantify it, but it's hard to just say, oh, this is the nuts and bolts of a story. Put it together, motherfucker. Like sometimes you think it can be like that when you're younger, but yeah, man, it's I guess he shows that, Whenever you get in the weeds with a project, you realize how like unique each one is. And when I'm talking about projects, I mean like poetry, but I think it extends to a lot of of things that we do in life. Like like if I was building a bike, it's its own thing, it's its own experience, and you got to treat it like that. Otherwise, it becomes rote and it's not fun, and it doesn't. We don't have the same like product, in that world as in maybe writing, but yeah, personally, you kind of have to keep it fresh in that way, and remember that each time you attack it. I'm not continuing the bike thing, by the way. That's a horrible metaphor. But each time you attack like a piece of writing, you gotta kind of honor it as its own thing and have fun with it. That's what I'm taking away from Ron Carlson. Have fun with the writing. And it's easier to look at this and say, "Oh, this is fun," because it's not about a kid dying. It's not about the 3 Mile Island accident, blah blah. All these stories. Somebody getting shot, even though that's a really fun story. Somebody getting shot in the head, bullet in the brain.
Yeah.
It's easier to say, "Oh, this is fun," because it's written fun and it's about family and love, and maybe there's a little loneliness thrown in, just spice it up a little bit. But it really like drives that point home for me. Gotta have fun with it, and like you pointed out earlier,
maybe the loneliness is there because no matter, even in the greatest heights of happiness and joy, it's still a little bit of loneliness.
still inside your
Part
head,
of your
man.
soul. And nobody's perfect life either.
Right. Even this guy has to deal with the fact that and he's doing well with it. He's dealing with the fact that he's not a genius, and he has that like loneliness against his family. But he still succeeds in making connections with his people he loves, and that's what's shown in the story. And it's like you said, feel good. And talk about like elevator pitch for this story versus what we were talking about earlier with Eminem. Like, how about I tell you a story about a family of geniuses and one of them isn't? Like, what do you mean by a family of genius? You're like kind of like a little bit intrigued, I think. Like, oh yeah, this guy invented he invented the cameras on the moon landing. Like, how the fuck do you think that happened in space? That's amazing, right? Or this kid at 10 years old figured out how to make stevia or whatever. It wasn't stevia. It's like half an hour, sweet and low or something, whatever. Remember that line, that throwaway line? Like his first like bout of genius was like making artificial sweeteners in a mood enhancer.
That's fucking funny.
It's so fucking funny, man. It's so fucking funny, and silly and like amazing. Like if anybody told you, like, yeah, at 10 years old, I created Splenda, like fuck. Tell me about your family. Like, oh yeah, my mom was this amazing poet. Yeah, it's like the complete opposite. You want to hear this story, but it's at the end of the day, it's just the same. It's just intriguing when you get down into it. It doesn't just rest on its laurels. In a lot of ways, it's a really hard story to tell. Like sitting down, like where do you go with this? I guess his angle was like, oh well, one of them wasn't. And this is the story about him. Like anybody could tell the story about the kid, who was a boy genius, and just get by on the events of the life. But no, this story is more decides to take a harder angle and attack the nuance of of the situation.
A more unique story.
Yeah.
It's a story about a kid who was born, instead of the genius who was born into a family of idiots, here's a fucking normal kid who was born into a family of geniuses and trying to find your place in that world and how you would navigate it and how you would find friends and how you'd invite friends over and what your friends would say to your parents and
yeah,
more than that, just how you would find your place in the world, which, by the way, is kind of the point of kind of flying. Also, is finding your place in the world and accepting your lot in life. I think that's a lot of Ron Carlson in general, is coming to terms with your lot in life. A lot of short fiction just in general. A lot of stories are, I thought I was going to be this one thing, but it turns out I was going to be this. And coming to terms with that. I thought I was going to change the world. I thought I was going to be a great basketball player. I thought I was going to be, the next Eminem. I thought I was going to be, um, Don Juan. I thought I was going to be Jesse James, and it turns out I was just some ordinary schmuck. It's actually the point of Goodfellas
Right.
is coming to terms with the fact that all the people that he admired when he was a kid were pieces of shit, and that he wasn't Jesse James. He
Right.
was just an ordinary schmuck. A lot of Scorsese's work coming to terms with life as it is. Uh, and it's a great place for fiction and for poetry to rest its laurels, if you want to use that expression. Is just that, it's just coming to terms with things. Coming to terms with my brother's death, and that I'm always going to be affected by it. Coming to terms with my wife's death, and
Yeah.
And that I'm never going to be normal again, but I can start moving closer towards that, even if it's just talking to my dead brother while I'm fucking my wife. Which, by the way, not to offset this, but if you're the type of poet, John, that if you can't tell somebody the synopsis of your poem and get that reaction, which is, I don't know, man, sounds like one for the diary, then that's how you know that it's not something you should be writing about, or it's not one to publish. Like, I only want to publish the motherfucking ones that I should have hidden from everybody.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I didn't really take it all that serious. I mean, I just know that I don't know. We talked about it, I think, last time about Sharon Olds. Like a lot of people don't want to hear about her father's, perspective on the abusive relationship. Like I don't know, like
Here's a story about how they tied me up and beat me.
yeah.
And then my mom came and tried to feed me SpaghettiOs. They
But you know
wouldn't
what?
untie me until I apologized.
There's freaks out there like us would be like, listen, I don't like that's uncomfortable, but dude, my dad did this to me, like this other thing to me. I'm not alone, man. I want to hear your story. And it might not be like I want to hear from a stranger on the street, but damn, I'll read a poem about it, or I'll watch a movie with it, and like shit like that happens, and people need to, there's a way to commiserate at the very least, and we've talked about that before.
Somebody stopped me
too.
on the street and told me that, I'd sit and listen to them. But
Well, yeah, you definitely fucking would. I would be like, no, man. What do you want from me? That's what I would be thinking.
I just want to read you this poem, bro.
Yeah, right, buddy. I bet you have a big old poem in your pocket.
I don't know. I can't even go to the library without seeing a bunch of people get into a giant argument over nothing. So,
well, that's the beauty of Florida, man.
As far as I can tell, there's more fucked up people in the world than there are not fucked up. And those are the ones that I'm writing to. Or, in fact, I'm writing to both. I'm writing fucked up shit about my life for the fucked up people and for the not fucked up people to cringe and wish that they hadn't heard it and to be uncomfortable. Because that's what gives me joy, is making those stuffy pricks uncomfortable.
Yeah, amen to that, I guess. Amen to that.
And
it's funny, I know, it's like tying this back to Ron Carlson. He's nothing like that.
I don't think he's that much of an anomaly either. Like, maybe he couldn't write about human pain as well as Hemingway or Dostoevsky could, but go into a classroom and read that description of the vagina to a class. Just it's the first thing you say. You don't even say hi to them or anything. And there's been a bunch of uncomfortable people in that classroom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
he definitely has moments like that. That's for sure.
I just had a seminar about sexual harassment. I might get pulled aside for reading that. especially if I were to do it in that way. So I don't know. I think I don't think that he was as uncomfortable with being with writing about uncomfortable things as your average writer is. I think that he liked it because you have to like it as a writer. You have to You have to like writing about sex. You have to like writing about violence, and you have to write. You have to like writing about heartbreak. You have to like writing about people that are going through shit. Anywho,
Yes.
about all I have to say about
To
Ron
all
Carlson.
that.
Maybe we'll talk about Keith at some point. Which
Yeah, I mean, it's been so long since I read that I kind of.
Keith is fucking amazing. But
Yeah, Keith
let's take
is
a
like
break
up
from
there for sure.
Ron Carlson and you want to talk about did you get that other poem I sent by what's her name?
Dorian
Uh
Locks.
yeah. I
Oh,
sent a
that's her
second
too.
one.
Yeah, I sorry I left you unread there. I started reading at a bad like I was in the car or something and I couldn't read it well. So I'll check it out. That first poem you sent though, the two pictures poem. Oh my god,
Yeah.
she is like look man. I got into her a little bit back in the day because she's a lot like Sharon Olds. Like even her older stuff is. Those must be new. What book are they from? Are they from a newer book?
I don't
Leo's
know.
reading.
I'm gonna have to ask Leo. She sent me the
But
poem.
yeah. But they were
They
always
weren't as
like
good as
kind
that.
of they were always kind of like good. Like I liked her style, you know. Like but like you know, somebody has your aesthetic. There's only so far it takes you. You still have to like deliver the goods, and I wasn't jiving with it. But every once in a while, her name would pop up, and I'd read a good poem from her, and yeah, she's really good. And that poem, though, man, that poem is the shit. It's so simple and it's so fucking tragic, and but I'll read the other one too, of
So
course.
understated. Um, and yet it says everything that it has to say. You know, I mean, goddamn. Uh,
Yeah, man.
talk about a poet who is a master class in restraint and only saying what you have to say. Uh,
Oh, do you want to
uh,
do those two next time, or since they're fresh?
yeah, yeah.
Fuck
We'll do
yeah,
those
let's do it.
two, and it'll be we'll talk about portraiture and writing.
Ah, cool.
Um,
Yeah, I got a couple other poems we can think about too. When it comes to
awesome.
that,
Hell yeah.
let's think about that. Yeah, let's think about that.
All right.
Fuck
So
yeah.
I teach on Wednesdays, but and
What's
I
your
also got um from 12 to 4. So if you want to do something around like let's say 4:30, I'll hang out in my office and we'll just talk
Okay.
in there.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
sure.
I mean I don't imagine the first week that anybody's gonna really
Do,
have much stuff to
do,
ask
do you
me.
have like headphones and stuff?
No, but I have my own office. I don't share. I don't think I share it
Oh,
with
okay.
anybody.
Oh, so it's like it's nice
And
then. It's like has
it's
a
at
door and
this
everything.
yeah, yeah, it's at this like remote part of FAU where hardly anybody goes. If I close the door, nobody's going to hear us.
Yeah.
So as long as I
Yeah,
have
okay.
reception, I think we'll be good.
Yeah, cool. That sounds great. We'll do 4:30 then. That totally works out. It gives me a little bit of time. 3:30 was or 3 o'clock is little is tough for me just because if I'm not like I like to kind of read the story right before a lot of times and it doesn't really give me enough time to do that. So this is better. Um
Beautiful.
yeah, and okay, one more thing before we end this. For the YouTube, since it doesn't really fucking matter right now. I put one up today, and I think I'm gonna just schedule everything to go for Sunday, like I said last time, and then Wednesday, in the middle of the day until we're caught up.
Anybody.
Since we're so like we have a few back,
Yeah, we got like 10, dude.
just it'd be better to put them up fresher, since we're still figuring everything out. We didn't even know what we're doing at first with this stuff, so we'll just put them on YouTube so that when in 10 years we could look back and and one of us will be dead probably, Craig.
Yeah.
Like that's what this is for. This is for our future dead selves to
I said the same
cry
thing
about. Yes. We need
Yeah.
this. We need this. And if you're listening, John, and Craig's dead, fuck you, man. Fuck you. Why'd you kill Craig?
Yeah, what did I ever do you, John?
It's your fault, by the way. All right, no, I'm being really mean to my future self. It's obviously not your fault, you dumbass. All right, anyway, also, I'm assuming you're gonna die first. This is fucked up.
Yeah. Well, given how I eat, that's.
I know, man. What the
much
fuck? You need to we need to work on that. I'm gonna send you some links. All right. Not that it would help. You are in love with pasta and
no,
chicken
I didn't
cacciatore.
even gonna look at it.
Yeah, you won't.
I'm in love with pasta. I'm in love with cheeseburgers. I am drinking less. So
that will save you. I think that's gonna save you. That's what I gotta do. I gotta drink less beer. But
it's tough,
dude. If anybody's listening to this, they're like, "What the fuck are you doing right now?"
Luckily, Leo doesn't like alcohol, so
yeah, it's easier when you're with somebody who doesn't want to drink. And Laura's trying to get pregnant, so obviously she's not drinking much, if at all, during certain times of the month. So
yeah,
it's getting better. We're growing up.
Had to have it at some point, Sean.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, all right, man. Good shit. It's good talking to you. We'll so we're gonna do Lux next time, all right? Got it.
Yes, we'll do a couple by her. We'll do like 3.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll look at my old book and see if I find something from back in the day I liked. I know I got something. So,
awesome.
Cool, man. All right, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye.
Thanks.